We're already live on Clubhouse, as you guys can see. Okay. Give that a second to get started. And I know I'm probably missing one of these platforms, but good job, Remy. Way to take those down, man. Take some initiative. What city are those in? Those foreclosures? Those pre-foreclosures? Remy didn't fell off. See, he fell off his bike. All right. Remy, I'll call you after if you can hear me. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Folks, my name is Otis James. I'm a full-time real estate investor out of the San Francisco Bay Area. We're going to talk about effective landlording today. This is going to be based on the curriculum that I teach my students. So I came up with a guide to be an effective landlord based on my career in the multifamily commercial industry on the operations side. You guys know I'm a long-term hold investor. I invest all over the country. I'm not married to any particular investment strategy. Why do I look so bright on this? Light Skin Brothers is coming back. I'm sorry. Now I got to start all over. So I'm a full-time real estate investor out of the San Francisco Bay Area, licensed real estate broker in California, licensed real estate broker in Georgia. I spent 13 years in the mortgage finance industry. I spent over 2 decades in the multifamily commercial industry. I teach people how to invest with zero knowledge, and they'll typically stay with me until they determine they no longer need to be. And we do that through the 4 Data Points Academy. My investment company, James Street Capital, is what I use to invest in projects all across the country. I'm a consultant. I've consulted on multiple development projects, domestic and abroad. I had a notary signing agent company over 2 decades ago. On the non-real estate side, I took $585 utilizing an outsourcing business model, went on to create a company that generated 7 figures in the short time that I had it. I ran a real estate brokerage and mortgage brokerage with my father. I come from a real estate family. I am one of the only real estate investors doing it at this level in my family. But I was 3 years old, going to real estate meetings with my dad. Most people know that about me. Uncles, sisters, cousins, they're all real estate brokers and agents, and I am a little bit of both. 4 Data Points Academy was birthed out of necessity. I didn't plan on making it a large scale real estate investing training platform, but I just saw the way people were getting taken advantage of. And I started it in 2021 and started training people the right ways to invest in real estate at the basic level. I taught them how to mitigate risk because that's where a lot of people were getting taken advantage of. And we do that by asking 4 questions about every subject property that we're considering. Those 4 questions are: what does it cost? What does it cost to fix up? What's it going to be worth when I'm done? How much income can it generate? You can answer those 4 questions and interpret the answers to figure out whether or not a piece of property is in your buy box. Then you can protect yourself. Now, again, this is called the course within our course. It's not a course. I don't do courses. The educational component of what I'm about to teach is in our real estate family, right? So my students I don't just train people how to invest in real estate. That's the easy part. I also stay with them and make sure that the real estate is profitable all the way until they exit. And then when they start scaling up in asset class, for example, beginners are typically starting out with flipping homes, right? I don't think you should flip homes as a career. If you disagree with that, flip 3 or 4 in a row and then see if you still want to flip homes the rest of your real estate investing career. Flipping homes is active, but I teach people how to get active so that they can later be passive. Flipping homes is we call it a necessary evil, right? It's just a necessary part of what we do. And it's just another tool in your toolbox. Now, you guys on Instagram, it looks like I'm frozen over there. I don't know why, but I'm not going to fight with Instagram. I'm not going to fight with Instagram today. You ever want to complain about something, then you realize that it's free, and then you're like, well, oh, okay, my bad. Let me not. All right. So we're going to talk about effective landlording, being a landlord, and it's not just collecting rents. It is so far from that. If you are a landlord and you are just getting properties leased, thank you. I can't pronounce that, Mr. Takes Charge. If you are a landlord and you are just collecting rents, well, you're about to see what I mean in a second. If you guys have questions, feel free. Go ahead and put them in whatever chat you're on for whatever platform. I won't shut this down until I answer all the questions, regardless of how long it takes. My information is, if you guys are on TikTok, the phone number you can text me at is above my head. Instagram, and just you can reach out to me on any of these different platforms. You guys on Clubhouse, probably not going to really, well, just tap my face. All my information is in there. All right. So this is called Landlord Launchpad, right? This is the guide to effective landlording. This is really going to be broken down into whoever's throwing them hearts up. Thank you very much. I'm still, I've been doing this a long time, but I'm still sensitive. I still like the hearts and the shares and all that stuff. So thank you very much, TikTok family. All right. So where do we start? Tenant screening process. That is where we start. And the reason why we want to have a good screening process is because a poor screening process will make your life miserable. Most of the problems that landlords have to do with the screening process, which is why Section 8 has its ups and its downs, but primarily Section 8, people run into problems because of the screening process. It's diminished because they're planning on that government income. And one thing I hear about Section 8, hey, they're always on time. They're always on time. Yes. But just because the rent is always on time doesn't mean it's a good tenant. Okay. And you guys will soon realize that when a Section 8 person moves out and you go and get into your deposit accounting process, and don't worry, I'm going to teach you the entire deposit accounting process today, and realize that you're losing money on the exit. All right. So tenant screening, we're going to break it down into seven areas. And when we're looking at potential tenants, well, let's just get into it. All right. So a good screening process is important in several aspects of property management. Serves as a vital tool for risk management. Keep that in mind. Risk management. All right. And identifying potential tenants who might pose a threat to the property or its residents. This includes individuals with histories of late payments, property damage, or criminal activities, helping landlords avoid potential issues before they arise. Now, financial security. Reliable tenants ensure consistent rent payments, which is the primary revenue stream for landlords. Good screening process will filter out potential tenants with late or missing payment history. Property care. Bad tenants will tear your property up. Okay. Oh my God, I can't wait to get into that one. Reduce turnover. The more turnover you have, the more expensive it is for you. Why? Because anytime somebody leaves, not only are you realizing vacancy loss, right? Some of this stuff is going to be common sense. About 60% of it is going to be common sense. But not only are you experiencing vacancy loss when a tenant leaves, you are having to turn the unit. And depending on how long they were there, you can only recoup so much of what it is that you bill back for. Safety considerations, reduce legal issues, positive community and reputation. If you have a multifamily building in a particular neighborhood and there's always trouble over there and people are always acting up and people are always calling the police on some of these folks, then the city doesn't look kindly on that. All right. And last but not least, peace of mind. All right. You want to be able to sleep at night. So this is your process. Now we're going to talk about pre-screening preparation. So you want to gather the necessary documents, right? So you want to collect the rental application, authorization for background checks, and any other relevant documents. Now you should have a property management software where you can do all of this. And one of the reasons that I lean on property management software is so I can distance myself from the process. Now, you guys know most of you guys know, I come from the multifamily commercial industry. So I was overseeing $650 million in multifamily commercial assets. I was also responsible for about, hold on 1 second. I was also responsible for about 14,000 tenants. You guys got to forgive me. I'm a real estate investor first. So if you hear me pause or whatever, or if I have to stop and take a call in the middle of all this, that stuff comes first. So just bear with me. All right. You want to define your screening criteria. You want to have a clear criteria for tenant eligibility, including credit score, rental history, income, and criminal background checks were permitted. Now, this is where a lot of people kind of taper off when we start talking about having systems and processes in place to protect you. And I've been there. You got a property on the market, that mortgage is not going to stop. And if that mortgage is not going to stop, then you need to get some income, some relief. And depending on what your personal situation is, that could be hitting you every month. That could be causing a little bit of pain. So what I see people do is they loosen up their requirements on the screening side, right? Don't do that, and I'll tell you why. If your property isn't leased, we're going to get into that in a little bit. If your property isn't leased, it's not your screening process that is the issue. Okay, so we're going to get into what we call the 4 Ps when we have a vacant property, a vacant unit. 4 Ps is going to help us get it leased, right? So you got your pre-screening preparation, then you got your application collection. So you want to provide the application forms, and what I'll do is once somebody sees the unit, I will go ahead and send them a link to apply, and the entire screening process is automated, and I can distance myself from that. Why do I keep using the term distance, right? The phrase distance myself, because a lot of people haven't been hit with a, what do you call it? A fair housing violation. So I have another lesson called staying in compliance or something like that, having to do with the fair housing aspect of being a landlord. And just to give you a heads up, a violation, if they can prove that you violated, your first violation is 50 something thousand, I believe. The second one is, no, I think the first one is 30 something thousand. The second one is 50 something thousand. And then the third one, if they can prove that in 7 years, it's like 6 figures. It's like $100 and something thousand of fine, right? So that's why this is so important. And a lot of people that don't focus on a lot of these things that I'm about to mention, they just haven't been caught yet. I heard one person say, I look at their car and I see how they keep their car. And, if they keep their car messy, then I know they're not going to take care of my property, my unit. Well, that's probably I'm not going to say it's one of the dumbest things you can do. Let me deviate from that language. I will say this. I will say any person that says that is not very experienced in landlording, and they're leaving themselves exposed. So when I say exposed, that means exposed to potential liability and all the other negative things that come along with that. All right. So for number 1, pre-screening preparation, you want to make sure you gather all the necessary documents and you define the screening criteria. That's important. Keep the same criteria for everyone. If I have paper applications and I happen to be showing the unit, I don't do open houses anymore, but whoever I have, what they'll have is they'll have a printed application, and then they'll have the criteria stapled to the application. So when somebody wants to apply, they can just slide them that piece of paper, right? It's going to have the application and the screening criteria. You want to, if you forget what to do, just make sure you treat everybody the same. Make sure the process is the same for everybody. Okay. Now, initial review. We're doing credit checks. Property management software will do that. We're doing rental history verification. Now, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. But if I don't do an actual rental history verification, then that means the software has done a check through county records for evictions. Employment verification, I look for pay stubs, documentation. And it depends on which state that I'm leasing in. Like I have property in, Missouri? I have property in Missouri where the units rent for like $800-900 a month. I'm not doing all time, it's $800 or $900. Just give me the pay stub. You show me that you can pay it. I'll look at your credit report. Make sure you don't owe any other landlords. That's always a deal breaker for me. If you owe other landlords, you're not going to be one of my tenants. So we'll do the basic stuff. Criminal background check. It's legal in some places, in some places it's not. So make sure you understand where it's legal and where it isn't. And by the way, folks, you should, even if you have a property management company overseeing your assets, you still need to be on top of this, because you don't know how many property management companies that I had to train to manage my properties. And very few of them were more concerned with my property performance than I was. I had one property that was out in Detroit, or the outskirts of Harper Woods. And I had this was just one property out the way. And I actually bought this property for my daughter's mom, who's my girl now. Let me just go, my daughter's mom, my old lady. All right. So I bought it for her. And so it was kind of one off. I hadn't done a whole bunch of investing out there, but I can invest anywhere. I can start from scratch and put a team together and do all that stuff. And this property, it was just a one off. So it wasn't really showing up on my financials as a major impact. And I just happened to be sitting at home one day thinking, I wonder how that property is performing. I don't remember hearing anything about that. So I went to check on it, come to find out that property was vacant for 8 months. And they didn't tell me so I called the property manager. Now it didn't show up on my financials because it was only about $1,000 a month in rental income. It showed up, but it didn't raise an alarm. So I called them and I said, hey, what's going on? They said, oh, we're just having a hard time getting it leased at that price. And I said, okay, well, why didn't you tell me? Why reduce the price? They were like, well, some owners don't really like when you reduce the price. And anyway, I said, look, listen, young lady, I'm going to give you a plan of action to go ahead and get this property leased. And I will go ahead and draft the screening, right? The listing and all that stuff. It was leased in 2 weeks, right? Long story short. But if I wouldn't have said anything, then that person would have just let the property sit vacant. So I say all that to say you are going to have to sometimes not just manage your property, but manage the managers of your property. Okay. So the process, we got pre-screening and prep, application collection, your initial review, right? We're looking at credit check, rental history, employment verification, criminal background check, reference check, right? Those are 5 legitimate ones. Do I do those 100% of the time? Absolutely not. No, I don't. But keep in mind, my judgment is based on, managing 3,000 units at one time and 14,000 people, 14,000 tenants. So I just keep that in mind. Now, evaluation and decision making. What's up, Anthony Glenn? If you're still here, man, go ahead and come on up. Decision making process. Score applicants. So evaluate applicants based on the predetermined criteria. Assign scores to different aspects such as credit history, rental references, and employment stability. So when you guys are getting these different property management software, right? Is my English all right? Maybe I should go back to, when you guys are looking at these different software programs, the criteria is pre-populated. So you go ahead and set the criteria in a lot of these. And some of them don't have a set criteria. Some of them will just they'll just show you what the credit report is. If you guys need some recommendations, go ahead and reach out to me. I can get you a good property management software recommendation. As a matter of fact, I know some of the owners of some of these property management software companies, so I can get you guys a discount or something like that. All right. So how you process them is just as important as, well, I'll recap at the end. Communication. So you want to notify applicants. You got to communicate the application status to applicants quickly, whether approved, denied, or pending additional information. Again, I want to create as much separation from me with direct contact to the applicants. So no one can ever say, oh, well, I wasn't treated fairly, or I was discriminated against because, or we don't do any of that. Okay. So I want to distance myself. So I'll notify them. If they are approved, I'll let them know immediately. If they're not approved, I'll let them know immediately and why. And I'll document every conversation. Folks, I've been to eviction court 37 times and I've never lost. And the reason I never lost is because I have my documentation in order. All right. Just keep that in mind. Documented record keeping. So you got to have a system for this. Okay. And I'll do a quick recap before we go to the next section. So I'm hoping you guys aren't trying to take notes because I talk fast. And when I have my coffee in the morning, I talk even faster. That being said, documented record keeping. So record keeping, maintain detailed records of all applications received, including the screening reports, communication history, and final decisions. The property management software should have that in it, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Folks, you guys on TikTok, the reason that I say text yes to that number above my head is if you want more information or have questions, the number's up there. You're good to go. Just reach out to me and I'll make sure that I get you hooked up. Now, number 7, continuous improvement. So you got to review and update criteria. Sometimes my criteria changes. If, for example, I may have some properties that I set aside for transitional housing. Well, if those properties are designated for transitional housing, I'm going to relax my criteria. All right. I'm not going to, somebody that's addicted to that's been addicted to heroin, that's trying to get on their feet. They're not going to have a clean history, right? So sometimes I'll work with other organizations to make sure that we have a program in place. So it's just not fair to them to hold them to the same standard. Okay. Same with Section 8. If I have properties designated for Section 8, then I'm going to reduce my criteria, because typically Section 8, they're going to have a less than perfect credit history in many cases. So you got to be realistic. All right. So that is number 1. Okay. Tenant screening, the process. Pre-screening process, we gather the necessary documents. We define the screening criteria, make it the same for everybody. Application collected, we got to provide application forms or a link to the application process. You want to ensure completion, so review applications for completeness. Only complete applications should be processed once all required information is provided. Again, your property management software is going to facilitate that process for you, and it won't even screen until it's all complete. When you do your initial review, you're typically looking at 5 areas, but this can change. Credit check, that's always, that never changes. Rental history verification, employment verification, criminal background check, reference check. Do I always do a reference check? No, it depends on the purpose of the property. Again, if I'm doing something for transitional housing or Section 8, I'm going to have a different set of standards than if I'm doing something for regular market tenants. Regular market tenant means tenants that are not getting any assistance. Evaluation and decision making, that's number 4. You want to score the applicants, but make sure this is all facilitated within the property management software, so no one can come back and say, oh, you didn't lease to me because the color of my skin, or because you saw me with kids, or for whatever reason, right? You want to get into communication, just notify people of the result as quickly as possible. Documents and record keeping, this should all be within your property management software. Continuous improvement, always revamp your processes, making sure you're staying in compliance. Now, the next thing, that was the tenant screening. Now, setting rental prices. This is where people need a significant amount of help. They look and see what similar properties are renting for, and they assume that theirs should rent for the same. So I have 7 areas now. I got about 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 areas to consider when you are setting rental prices. So pay attention. Now, location, right? Isn't that what they say? So location, areas to consider when setting rental rates. The neighborhood and location of the property play a significant role in rental prices. Now, folks, keep in mind, I created this guide as if you were purchasing a 300 unit apartment complex. So you can, this applies to just a single family home or a condo or whatever it is. These standards came from the multifamily commercial industry. And I was on the operations side of some of the largest property management companies on the planet. Right, I think the last one I was with had about 700,000 units that they manage. They were the largest. I'm not going to say the name because they don't pay me. Areas to consider when considering rental rates. Location. Now, this is going to be overkill. I understand that. Okay, but I just told you where I'm getting this from. So it's better to have overkill, have the information and not need it, than need the information and not have it. All right. So location plays, type and size plays a role. Condition of the property. Well, this is common sense. Well-maintained properties, you can get more rent. Market analysis. So research the local real estate market to understand average rental prices in the area. I use a service called rentometer.com. It's spelled rentometer.com. It'll give me a market analysis. I don't just use it to do a market survey when I'm putting a property on the market. I also use it to do renewals, right? So we're going to get into the renewal process also. Now, utilities and amenities. If you include utilities such as water, gas, and electricity, or provide amenities like, internet, cable TV, or access to a gym or laundry facilities. These factors can influence price. Now, when I'm going over these, I'm going to share my train of thought with you all concerning some of these things. Now, I there's a way to implement the benefits of these additional amenities outside of just the rent. But keep in mind, let's say you have a two bedroom and similar two bedrooms in the area are going for $1,000 a month. Clearly not in California, but $1,000 a month. Now you say, hey, but I also pay for internet and I also pay for utilities. Well, I'll just build it into the rent. Okay. Well, great. So instead of charging $1,000 a month, maybe now you charge $1,200 a month. What you did by structuring it that way and building it into the rent, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to that. The advantage of building it into the rent is if you have to evict somebody, you can only evict them in many places for rent, not the ancillary charges, right? So you can evict them for rent, so it makes it easier to evict. Now, the downfall, right? And this is, anytime we look at what we're doing in real estate investing or whatever it is, there's always an upside and a downside, and it's up to you to determine if the upside outweighs the downside or vice versa. In this case, the downside of billing everything into the rent outweighs the benefit. Now, another problem with that is now you've got a $1,400 or $1,200 two-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where two-bedroom apartments are going for $1,000. So you just priced yourself out of the market. So when my students come to me with that type of plan in mind, I say, okay, well, let's not do that. Matter of fact, let's bring it down to $995. And then in the listing, we will explain that we bill back for utilities. Let's not include it in the rent. Let's keep it for a separate conversation. Then if somebody pays the rent but is not paying their utilities, you can still move forward with the eviction process. But instead of sending them a 3-day notice to pay or quit when they don't pay rent, or a 5-day notice to pay or quit, depending on where you are, you can send them a 3-day notice to covenant or quit, which is basically when they're violating some of the policies or something else in the agreement. So you really have to know how to navigate that depending on where you live, right? Now, I mentioned I was overseeing 3,000 units here in the Bay Area, and this is probably one of the hardest places to be a landlord in the country. And I say that with a significant amount of confidence. We've got Berkeley up here, San Francisco, San Jose, and all up the peninsula. Like, it's very liberal and very tenant friendly. All right. You can thank Gavin Newsom for that. All right. Now we're talking about things to consider when setting your rental rates. So location, property size, condition of the property. You do a market analysis. If you're covering utilities and amenities, you can either build that in or not, or bill it separately. Tenant demand. Consider the demand for rental properties in the area. If there are many tenants looking for housing and limited housing available, it's going to be reflected in the rental amount. Higher demand, higher rent. Property upgrades. So if you've recently made significant improvements and renovations to the property, you can justify a higher rental price. New appliances, flooring, or a renovated kitchen or bathroom can increase the property's value. Keep in mind, there's always a balance. I don't care how many improvements you got. You are probably not going to get $2,500 for a two bedroom in a neighborhood where two bedrooms are going for $1,200. All right. So what happens is, and this is some of the conversations that I have with my students when we're talking about how to improve a property for rental, we have to look at the improvements and see if those improvements are justified based on how much rental income can be generated from them. All right. It's not always good to just improve the property at maximum potential, right? We have to look at the numbers first. All right. Operating expenses. So you got to factor in operating expenses such as property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and property management fees. This is something that we do in our projections during the due diligence phase of the acquisition where we're buying the property. So this is, I typically, for my students, I hold their hand through this process because their first time, they don't know what they're doing. All right. They know a little bit, but they don't know what they're doing. So I typically take the lead on all of these things, and we have all of these conversations before we're fully committed. All right. Number 9, rent control regulations. And for those that just jumped in, we are talking about all of the things that we consider when we're talking about where to set our rents. Rental control and regulations. If you guys are purchasing property and you want to rent it out in a rent controlled environment, you better be on it. And if you are going to be a landlord and have multiple properties in that type of environment, you better have a mentor. But if you don't have a mentor, I'll give you some lower cost options that you guys can utilize to make sure you're not put in the poorhouse. All right. So rent control and regulations. Be aware of any rent control or regulations in your area, as they may limit how much you can increase the rent each year. Now, I've managed thousands of units in a rent controlled environment. And when I tell you it is a nightmare, it is an absolute nightmare for landlords. Okay. 35 of the 37 times I went to eviction court was in a rent controlled environment, right? Just cause eviction. So you really have to have your documentation where it needs to be. People they wouldn't have the money to pay rent, or they'd spend it on something else. And they would say, hey, look, we're not paying rent because you didn't fix X, Y, and Z. Now, a lot of those people didn't know that we paid about $70,000 for the property management software implementation that we had for that particular development. We tracked everything. Okay. So, and I, it was a tough assignment, but I'm grateful for it because it made me an outstanding landlord, right? Having to look at every single detail. So rent control. There's something called, any of you guys that are in a rent controlled environment, just reach out to me. I'll probably do a workshop on how to navigate that, because that in and of itself is an entire curriculum, right? But just understand the rules. If you're not somebody that likes to read a whole lot, go to your county website in the rent controlled environment, look at the ordinance, download the ordinance. It's typically on there in a PDF, upload it to ChatGPT, tell ChatGPT, hey, look, I'm considering renting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in this one particular area. This is the ordinance. Is there anything I need to consider? I was hoping to get about $1,500 a month. It's, I'm buying it for about $150,000. And basically just prompt your way to a conversation with the ordinance uploaded. All right. That's the easy way to do it. People call me with rent controlled questions, some of my students, and I go to the county and there's like 150-page ordinance, and I get back to them in like 15 minutes and they're like, how'd you read all that? I was like, I'm very, very smart. I'd be lying. I'm a child prodigy. Psych. I was a C student. All right. Economic factors, tenant profile, long-term versus short-term rentals. So let's talk about long-term versus short-term rentals. I don't buy property unless it can survive on a traditional lease, period. I've got plenty of properties that I've leased out to my students. 90% of the properties that I leased out to my students so they could do short-term rentals, their businesses failed. Big time. And on average, each student probably owed me anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 when it was all said and done. Did I go after any of them for that $5,000 or $8,000? No, I didn't. Why? Because I'm a big old teddy bear. Most of the time I just cry in the shower. No one, just me. All right, it's fine. Moving on. Tenant profile. Let's go back to short-term versus long-term rentals. So consider whether you're offering long-term or short-term rentals. If you own the property, it's a different conversation. If you're doing it arbitrage, don't do that. I'll just say don't do it. It's not going to be very profitable, with few exceptions. I do know people doing arbitrage in particular areas and they're cashing out, right? They're doing really, really well. Most of the people that I know doing it failed. All right. Short-term rentals often command higher nightly rates, but have more fluctuations in demand. And that's the issue. And every time somebody leaves, you got to turn it, get it cleaned. And it's just, it's always going to be an issue. All right. Tenant profile. Evaluate the type of tenants you want to attract. If your property caters to a specific demographic, such as students, young professional, or families, research what those tenants are willing to pay in rent. All right, that's kind of my freebie one, right? That's me making this. I'm gonna tell you like this. You can buy property in the hood, it's cheap, but property management in the hood is gonna cost you something long term. Okay. I do not buy properties in the hood or war zones. Now, I monitor properties in the hood because I'm gonna let all that activity, all that nonsense drive the property values down. And when I feel like it's worth it, then I'll go down there and scoop a bunch up for Section 8. And then I will have a management company that is actually from the hood manage it. But I ain't going over there. All right. Economic factors. Consider the overall economic conditions in your area, including job growth, inflation, and economic stability. These factors are going to influence the rental market. Look, folks, there's a reason why I tell people 4 data points is the foundation of real estate. When you start talking about looking at economic factors in a particular area, I know a lot of these high level conversations, there's a lot of things to consider, right? If we're talking about considering buying a 200 or 300 unit apartment building, yes, I get as granular as possible, all the details on market research. If I'm just doing a single family home, the 4 data points is going to tell me everything that I need to know. What does it cost? What does it cost to fix up? What's it going to be worth when I'm done? How much income can it generate? If I got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in 2 different markets, and one 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I can get $1,800 a month for it. And the other 3-bedroom, 2-bath, I can only get $900 a month for it. That tells me everything I need to know about the market and the economy there. That tells me everything I need to know. Now I just have to look at what's my acquisition cost relative to how much it's going to make. That one I'm getting $1,800 a month for may look really, really attractive. But if I got to pay $350,000 for it, whereas that one where I only get $900 a month looks less attractive, but it only cost me $40,000, I'm gonna go with the $900 a month. I'll just keep it, right? Just keep it long term, and then give it to my children. Now we're getting into this is common sense. Now, what are the pitfalls when we're talking about pricing it too high? That's the thing about being on all these platforms. I don't know where to look, right? So if you guys see me, like, I'm looking at all the different screens. All right. Pitfalls: vacancy rates. Higher rents may deter potential tenants, leading to increased vacancy rates. Vacant properties do not generate rental income, which can impact the landlord's cash flow and overall profitability. I'll say it like this. You have to look at, and we're going to get into this when I start talking about renewals, right? We're only on the second component. When you start increasing the rental rates, you have to weigh 2 things: the additional income from raising the rate versus the potential vacancy loss for somebody moving out or somebody deciding not to move in because the price is too high, right? That typically requires a conversation. And this is in the context of me as a mentor and my students, right? So we usually have to talk through this. And there's a lot we take into consideration, okay? Their financial objective is one of the things we take into consideration. Like, what's their exit? How long do they plan on having this property? Because the opportunity to manage rents up over time is attractive, right? It's attractive, it's consistent. We can have projections that are more accurate. And as long as we're not too aggressive, it could be a good situation. Sometimes they want to come in and charge rent based on what their financial obligation is for the property. And that's not how it works. Just because you got a loan at 15% doesn't mean that you can increase rents to cover that debt. Anyway. All right. Extended vacancy periods. Vacancy loss is not your friend. That property needs to be generating money every single month. All right. Is that Biz Cap? All right, come on up, brother. You guys are more than welcome to come up on stage on this on TikTok too. I'm just doing me. I mean, I do like my big head covering the whole screen, but I'll get some squares out. All right, y'all on Clubhouse, we're just getting into it. So make sure that you guys know how to reach out to me. So if you have any follow-up questions, I'll go ahead and get them to you. So now we're talking about the pitfalls of pricing too high. Decreased tenant interest. Okay, I'm not even going to spend no time on that one. If it's too expensive, it's too expensive, right? You're not tracking tenant interest. That's reflected in the lack of traffic coming to your unit to look at it. You can't get a negative reputation for doing that, but that's typically on a much larger scale. No, I'm not going to spend time on that one. All right. Difficulty in rent increases. Look, there's a reason why a lot of landlords say, we want you to make 3 times the rent, or we want you to make 2.5 times the rent. And we're getting, landlords get a lot of pushback for that. And the issue with that is tenants don't see everything that is required of a landlord. They think it's just maintenance. Well, there's some things that continue to increase. For example, expenses increase, insurance premiums increase. Right? Now, why is that a big deal? Well, it's not as big a deal in 1 to 4 units, but if you have a 5-unit apartment building, the value is based on the income the property generates, specifically the net operating income. So if insurance premiums are going up and rents are staying flat, your net operating income is decreasing. Now, assuming maintenance stays flat, that's going to reduce the value of the building. And a lot of tenants don't really understand that, right? Now, the reason we require 3 times the rent or 2.5 times the rent is because all of these things get more expensive over time. Rents are typically managed up over time, typically at about 3%, right? The smart landlords will keep it about 3%, right? And if you mismanage that process, you can get caught behind the curve. So you want to make sure that people have enough room in their income to absorb some of the rental increases. Okay. I hear this all the time. Well, I didn't want to increase the rent because it's a good tenant. Oh yeah. You ain't built for this. I get it, but you ain't built for this. Increased turnover. High rents can lead to higher turnover rates as tenants move out in search of affordable housing options. Constant turnover means higher costs for finding new tenants and potential periods of vacancy between leases. Now, remember, everything is a balance. If rent is $700 a month and market rent for the same unit is $900 a month, am I going to increase the rent $200 a month on this person? Well, no, that's a huge percentage of an increase, right? You don't want to give them payment shock, because if they move out, guess what? Not only am I not getting the $900 a month, the extra $200, then I got to turn the unit. And if they've been there longer than 5 years, then guess what? The useful life of all of the things you would charge back for has expired. So when you have to replace everything, you cannot charge them back for it. For example, carpet, or let's just call it flooring. I depreciate flooring at 20% a year. That's pretty much the industry standard. Now, if they move out after 1 year, I can bill them back for 80% of it. If they move out after 2 years, 60%, 3 years, 40%, 4 years, 20%, 5 years, 0%. So is it worth me having to turn that unit for a long-term tenant where I'm not going to recoup anything? And if I got to do flooring, paint, and all the things, I may be in $5,000. Is it worth spending $5,000 to get an extra $200 a month? That's $2,400 a year. It's going to take me over 2 years to recoup that. And what if that tenant moves out after the first year? So it's not worth it. So what I would do, instead of increasing the rent from $700 to $900, maybe I increase the rent to $775, right? And then maybe next year I increase the rent $825, right? Because look, people ain't gonna move over $75, right? But they'll move over $200. Okay. All right. Any questions about any of that anywhere? Yes, no, maybe so. All right. Let me check. All right. You guys are very, very quiet. I like that. Am I just so brilliant in the teaching that you're just mesmerized and you're like, huh? No, that's not it. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Where we at? Difficulty in rent increases. I already talked about that. Increased turnover, decreased property value. Oh my God. Properties that remain vacant for extended periods of time due to high rents can face depreciation. Now, this is more specific for multifamily commercial 5 units or above. Vacancy loss goes against your net operating income. If you plan on refinancing, that net operating income is going to be your bread and butter. That's the first thing they're going to look at. And those that are in our real estate family, you guys already know the formula. Net operating income divided by cap rate equals value. So a lower net operating income divided by the cap rate equals lower value. So it's really detrimental. So the asset type. So if you are looking to lease out and manage a 5 unit versus a 4, 3, 2, or 1 unit, we're going to have different conversations about how to move forward, because certain decisions are going to impact you more than in multifamily commercial than in residential, right? Now, keep in mind, folks, if any of this stuff seems overwhelming, this is what mentorship is. Okay. Now I could just I could take this guide and just hand it to somebody and say, here, go be great. Right. But there's a lot of conversations within each of these topics that have to be discussed. Right. And there's certain questions people don't know to ask. Right. Now I love when people ask questions, but if you don't have any experience, you don't know which questions to ask. What's up, Big E? You don't know what questions to ask. So this is mentorship. If you have a mentor, it doesn't have to be me, right? Doesn't have to be me. I'm sure there's other mentors out there. Any mentor should set this process up for you. How would you run the numbers on a duplex house hack on a 300 unit or $300,000 property? So I would look at the income that it generates, and I would look at what your monthly obligation is on that. And I would subtract the monthly obligation from the income that it generates, and whatever that difference is, multiply it times 12. That's how much you cash flow. And then I would look at how much actual cash you had to put into the property and compare it to that, and you're going to come up with a percentage. And if that percentage of a return is good enough for you, then hey, it's good enough for you. But that's typically a conversation that's a much longer conversation. He said, that boy got that fresh cut lineup. You know what it is, man. I'm still Otis James in this. I'm sorry. I get overwhelmed when I get a compliment. I get excited. I'm sorry. I'm back. Thank you to the 5 people on TikTok that shared the room. This is all the information that I'm giving you guys today about property management, effective landlording. You would have to pay for this in a course somewhere, right? But it's Saturday, and I like talking about real estate like people like talking about their favorite football team. So if you can, go ahead and share the room to help us blow up our TikTok. We got a new TikTok page. We got to do all the nonsense. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much to that one person that just listened to me right now. You folks on Clubhouse, y'all know what it is. All right. Again, we're on potential pitfalls to pricing too high. Okay. Legal implications. In some regions, setting rents excessively high might violate rent control laws and regulations. Landlords could face legal consequences, fines, or orders to reduce rents to be at a reasonable level. I'll say this. Here's your best landlording advice. Don't be a landlord in California, Washington, Oregon, New York, and New Jersey. There's some good advice. All right. Sorry. I got triggered. Can you tell? Now we're going into the next phase, right? We started talking about the first phase, which is tenant screening. We went over the screening process, right? We went over setting rental rates, so strategies for maximum profitability. And now we went over pitfalls of pricing property too high. Now we are at managing lease renewals. Now there should be a system in place for all of these things that we are going to be discussing, okay? A system in place. So when somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I'm a landlord now. All right, cool. Let's have a talk. Now, all my students, they get this guide right off the bat. So some of them, they've been through this so many times that they don't even need to call me on it, right? But I still ask them to kind of clue me in, to let me know how they set it up. And, I don't want any of my students out there trying to figure out what to do next, primarily because their name is attached to mine. So if you out there unsuccessful or messing up or getting in trouble, that impacts me. And we don't want to do that. Okay. Managing lease renewals. Staggering leases out strategically throughout the year can be a smart move for landlords, especially in regions where rental prices fluctuate based on seasons. So here's why the approach can be beneficial. Maximize income. So by staggering leases, landlords can avoid having multiple leases expire simultaneously. This ensures a consistent income stream throughout the year rather than experiencing a significant drop in revenue if several tenants decide not to renew during the same season. We're talking about vacancy loss. Now, I have managed student housing, and I know it's attractive because there's the illusion of demand when you buy a house next to a college or a duplex next to a college. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to be profitable, but I'm saying you have to understand what questions to ask when you're doing that. All right. Typically what makes these profitable is the business model attached to them. So what do you mean, Otis? What's the business model attached to them? All right, I got a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. On a traditional lease, if I lease it out to students, I'm going to run into some problems. And I'm not talking about student behavior and all that stuff. They're only in school for 9-10 months. So not only do you have high turnover, but you've got that guaranteed vacancy loss. So now you're doing all your repairs during months where you're not getting any income. Okay. You can also price yourself out of the market. Let's say the going rate for a 2-bedroom is $1,000 a month. Well, $1,000 a month is great, but it's going to be vacant for 2 months. So your effective rent, let me see what it is. Hold on. I think it's $833, but hold on. So it's $12,000 a year. Okay. Let's do it this way. So it's $10,000 a year because it's $1,000 a month and it's going to be vacant 2 months, 10,000. You still got to divide it by 12 because that's your effective rent. I was right. Your effective rent is $833 a month. Now your effective rent is what's on the books. Okay. Now, if you lease your property for $1,000, and remember, we just went over how to set rental rates. If you lease your property for $1,000 a month and it's going to be vacant for 2 months, your effective rent is $833 a month. So most people say, okay, well, I'll just make up for that. I'll increase it to $1,200 a month. So my effective rent is higher and I can absorb that vacancy loss. But now you got to look who you're competing with. If you're competing with other landlords that aren't specific to student housing, what's up, Crystal? That aren't specific to student housing, then what does that mean? That means they are not realizing vacancy loss during those 2 months, or they have a system in place where they can absorb it. Maybe they only allocate 1 or 2 units for student housing and the rest are market. So you trying to compensate for that 2 months of vacancy loss by increasing your rent, just priced yourself out of the market because you're not even coming up in the same searches as these other landlords because they always have price in the searches, right? So again, these are conversations that we have to have when we are, thank you for sharing, Crystal, when we are considering being landlords near student housing. Okay. So in addition to that, now let's move away from student housing. Let's say that you have a 10-unit apartment building and it's regular market, right? You want to stagger your leases out. So what I'll do is, let's say somebody's lease expires in, I don't know, April. I'll give them multiple lease options. Okay. I'll say, hey, I don't want leases expiring in Q4. Why? Because when they move out, the market rents are typically lower because people aren't moving. It's the holidays, right? So I want very few leases expiring in Q4, October, November, December. I don't want any expiring in December, right? If I'm going to have leases expiring, I'd rather they expire in summer. Why? Because rents are higher in the summer. And if somebody moves out, then I can recoup a little better on the rent in the summertime. Okay. So you want to stagger leases and you don't want too much vacancy loss in those times of the year where rents are lower. All right. Capitalize on peak season. Well, that's really just what I said, right? That's part of that. So in many places, rental demand increases during spring and summer when the weather's favorable and families prefer moving before the start of the school year. By having leases expire in late spring or early summer, landlords can take advantage of the higher demand and potentially secure higher rents. So that's what I'm referring to. Okay. Now, geographical location makes a big difference. Now, this is magnified at times 1,000 in areas that have the 4 seasons. All right. California, where I live in the Bay Area, it's average 70 degrees year round, right? It gets hotter sometimes. There's been days where it got up to 100. There's been days where it got down to, 50, 40, something. There's those one-offs, but typically it averages around 70 degrees, right? Avoid off-peak vacancies. That's just what I talked about. So that conversation was all encompassing. All right. Flexibility and rent adjustments. Staggered leases provide landlords with the flexibility to adjust rents based on market conditions. If the rental market is strong and rents are rising, landlords can adjust the rent for new leases while maintaining the current rent for existing tenants until their leases expire. This approach allows landlords to capitalize on market trends effectively. Now, I will say this, managing lease renewals is extremely important. So much so that in the multifamily commercial industry, we brought in a system to take a bunch of data and give us the most optimal rent. So it was something called dynamic pricing, which means the pricing changes every day for vacant units based on what our competitors are doing, how much traffic we have, just all of these different data points. All right. And that system to implement was extremely expensive, like ridiculously expensive. No mom and pops are going to be buying that. So I think it was like, I want to say like 70 something $1,000 or something ridiculous. All right. Just keep that in mind. Tenant retention. It's cheaper to keep happy tenants, but that old saying, the customer's always right. No, they're not. Tenants will try to get over on you. There's good tenants and there's bad tenants. Okay. I had a tenant, they moved in, and 3 days later, the neighbor said something about bed bugs, right? Now, there was never bed bugs at this property. This neighbor wasn't really a neighbor. They were the son of one of the contractors that were, and I don't know where he got that from, because there was never any bed bugs. But because he said that, the people, or they said that he said that, the people that lived there said, "Oh, we got bed bugs, and we want to move out." I said, "Well, there was that unit. Not only was it cleared by pest control, but there was no tenants there before them for a whole year. So just to be sure, I had pest control come out again. There were no bed bugs, no trace of bed bugs. All right. So they probably just got a better offer somewhere else and wanted to just get out of it. Right. You guys are going to run into that. You're going to run into that. So you have to have your paperwork and everything in place to be able to combat that. Right. Outside of those situations, tenant retention is important. You want to keep happy tenants, right? That means don't be a slumlord. Have systems in place and disclose what those systems are. For example, we have a system in place for maintenance. Tenant calls, says, "Hey, the blinds, the blinds, 2 of the blind slats came off. No problem. We'll get it fixed ASAP." And a lot of them have kids that'll mess this stuff up. But I'm going to bill them back for the cost of the blinds, and I'm going to bill them per hour for what it costs to fix it. And I'll send them an invoice. Now, people don't like that, but it is what it is, right? It is what it is. As long as you disclose what that policy is in the beginning. I'll usually put that language in my lease that they have to sign. Right. Spread out administrative work. Property management software is a lifesaver. It saves on a lot of the paperwork if you're managing a property yourself. Handling lease renewals and tenant turnover requires administrative efforts like property inspections, paperwork, communications. Staggered leases distribute this workload more effectively throughout the year, really more evenly. It prevents overwhelming administrative tasks all at once. When I was doing student housing, the day that these students came back to school was absolute chaos. Imagine a leasing office and 500 people there, right? Lines out the door, all of that, right? So let's keep that stuff in mind. Plan for maintenance and upgrades. So staggering leases enables landlords to plan for necessary maintenance and property upgrades more effectively. With a predictable schedule of lease renewals, landlords can schedule maintenance activities between lease terms, ensuring the property is well maintained and attractive to potential tenants. If you guys are coming in as real estate investors and you are using hard money, and you are, hard money, they have mortgage products that will pay for the property. They'll finance the purchase, well, most of it, and they'll pay 100% of the rehab or close to that, depending on which mortgage product that you utilize. There's a timing issue with that. That mortgage product, that fix and flip or rehab and rent, it's really the same process. That's not long-term financing. So if you are utilizing one of these products, then you have to make sure that you are doing all of the rehab within that time frame. So any rehab you do after that, because it's typically only a 12-month or 18-month situation, so you're not going to use one of those products where the lender pays for the rehab if you have to wait until all the leases expire, because you're paying high interest on that, right? So you want to do that immediately. All right. Where are we at now? You guys have a system for managing renewals? We're going to talk about that. It's very, very important. This is very, very important. A lot of people overlook this. Most property management companies don't know to do this. I'm talking about the mom and pops. the major property management companies, the Gray Stars and Essex Property Trusts and Pinnacles and FPIs and all those guys, this is ingrained, right? So when you are managing renewals, hold on, I'm gonna give y'all 3 seconds to grab a pen, because I would say I'll just give this guide to all of you guys, but that's too much administrative work for me. So when managing renewals, start early. Begin the renewal process well in advance of the lease expiration. This allows both the landlord and tenant sufficient time to consider options and negotiate terms. Now, one of the reasons that I do the renewals early is one, it's industry standard. So industry standard in the multifamily commercial industry, it's 4 months. You start the process 4 months. You basically check in, hey, how's it going? You get kind of a temperature check for how their experience has been. They still got 4 months before their lease expires, but you're just checking in, making sure everything's okay. That serves two purposes. One, it shows that you care about your tenants. And two, if they are going to complain about anything because of the new renewal rate, we can address it right then, right? So if they say, well, yeah, you guys are renewing, and shoot, I've been sitting in there with a broken faucet for 6 months. Well, common sense says, well, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you report it, right? So at this point, we can say, well, I checked with you like 4 months ago to make sure everything was going all right and told you if there was anything that you needed to reach out and, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you want to start about 4 months early. Communicate clearly. Now we're talking about this is our system for managing renewals, folks. Communicate clearly. So you want to initiate open and clear communication with the tenant about the upcoming lease expiration. Express your interest in renewing the lease and inquire about the tenant's intentions. Keep the lines of communication open and address any concerns that the tenant might have. It's just a conversation. All right. It's just a conversation. I'm very, very transparent. I'm one of the landlords that I'm not really driven by money like that. I understand it's a necessity. I get it, and I've got, good business acumen, so I know what it is, but I also know what it's like to be a human being too, right? And I know what it's like. Things happen, people living check to check. People got kids and all types of. So I listen to that. I really do, and I know how much a person makes. I have all that information. It's in their file, and I just have an honest conversation. I'll say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, look, you guys have been really good tenants, right? And, I went ahead and emailed you a rental analysis of the area. That's typically something I do to give people a point of reference for rental rates in the area. And right now you're paying, $900 a month. Rental rates have gone up to about $1,050 a month for a similar unit. I'm not trying to bring you guys up to market, but I do want to have a conversation about maybe $1,000 a month, right? Or maybe $975 a month. I'll typically start a little high, and then, we'll go back and forth, and I'll say, okay, look, $975, right? I can do $975, but you also got to understand that my costs are going up, and shoot, if it was up to me, if I could afford it, I would provide free housing to everybody. That's just not the world we live in, right? So, and as long as you have those conversations with them, then I think your tenants are going to appreciate that. Just remember, treat people like human beings first, right? The money is not worth it. When you impact somebody's quality of life and put that stress on them, it may be just one conversation for you, but that extra $150 a month, they're going to feel that every single month, right? And I've been there, and I know how much that can hurt. So treat people like human beings. It's not the most profitable thing to do that, but there's a saying, all money ain't good money, right? And I think your reputation is going to be the most valuable thing you have. And then people will take care of your property, right? I was managing this one. Well, my managers were managing it, and I was managing them for this one development. And this one development, I was a manager at that development. And then I got promoted to senior manager at that development. And then I went to corporate, and I was a regional manager, and this development was in my portfolio. But because I had such a good relationship with all of the tenants, and there was about 12,000 tenants altogether, and it spanned 52 acres. We had over 100 buildings, and it was a low income situation. And there's people out there just running amok sometimes. But because I had a good relationship with them, I could have conversations with these folks when I get a call from security at 12 o'clock in the morning that these a bunch of gangbangers are having a party by the pool. I can roll up, and there's a level of respect there to be able to manage that situation appropriately, because I treat people with dignity and respect, and I treat people like human beings. So having that good relationship with your tenants is important, and it will improve your situation financially long term. All right. Evaluate the tenant. If it's a good tenant, I'm more reasonable. If it's a bad tenant, I'll die on that hill. All right. I will die on that hill. Uh, and again, I teach the right way to do it. And I always teach that there shouldn't be an emotional component to, any of the decisions that we make. I get it. Right. But you disrespect me, or you disrespect my property, or, it's just, I will go to war with you, and you're probably not gonna win. All right. All right. I just changed my mood. Like, you ever get mad at something that ain't even happening in real life? You just, I changed my mood. I wish a tenant would. I'm just kidding. All right. Consider rent adjustments. Research the local market to determine if rent adjustments are even necessary. You might need to increase the rent to match current market rates. However, be mindful of setting a reasonable rent increase to avoid pricing out good tenants. Okay. We talked about that a little earlier. You guys on TikTok, thank you for sharing the room. I really appreciate that. I'll say it again. This is a new page for us, so we're growing it. The more opportunities that we get, we pass on to our students and our network. So everybody wins. So thank you for sharing this live. Thank you, amigo. I appreciate you, brother. You late, amigo, sharing, but I appreciate you, bro. All right. All right. Okay. Let me see. I need to talk to you, Otis, at some point. Okay. So Lou, you can text. I'm going to put this number in the chat. You guys on TikTok, that number is above my head, so you can already see it. Oh, what is it? All right. Oh, okay. You may have it. It's up in front of me, but I can't see it behind all these screens. So if you text me already, I'll get back to you. If you guys just have a really quick question and you want to text me, I'm more than happy to get back to you on it. If you guys want a full consult, you got to understand, I mentor 350 people. So this is the consult, right? So feel free to put the basic questions on here. If you guys are interested in mentorship, keep one thing in mind. And I don't tell people this, but I should start. If you call me, and most of the people have been following me for some time, so the decision's already been made. But if you call me and you decide, man, I want this guy to mentor me, right? And you like what you hear, and you can appreciate having a mentor that doesn't have an end date, so you've got unlimited support. If you can appreciate that, I always give a discount to people that make a decision on the first call. So there you go. That's the first time I ever told y'all that, but it's just what I do. All right. Have a system for managing renewals. We talked about starting early. Communicate clearly. Evaluate the tenant. Consider rent adjustments. Renewal terms and conditions. Clearly outline the terms and conditions of these lease renewals. Duration of the new lease, any changes in rent, and other terms. Folks, eForms, Rocket Lawyer, they have perfectly good lease agreements. There's always a section in there for other terms. If you're confused, go into ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these AI programs. Let them know exactly where your property is, what county it's in. Upload your lease, upload the PDF, and ask it, is there any other language I should add to protect myself? And they will, ChatGPT will go online, go to the county ordinance, right? Review the entire ordinance, and then review your lease. Make sure you're not violating anything, or you're not leaving yourself exposed. Okay. Now, just because it tells you what to put in there doesn't mean you should put it in there. So make sure you're leveraging all these AI platforms for, to organize information, but not to be your teacher. Okay. Garbage in, garbage out. When I do my lessons, I have I'll typically, transcribe them, right? So I'll just talk to have my lessons transcribed, and then I'll throw it into AI so it can organize the information. And then I have to read it to make sure it didn't screw up anything that I said, and to make sure it's not putting its own information in there, right? So make sure if you guys are using this technology, you're not leaning on it for understanding. You're just organizing information and fine tuning what you already know. All right. It'll save you a lot of time if you use it right. Okay. Renewal terms and conditions. Okay. Oh no, there was something else I wanted to add to that though that I thought was important. If you're using the same lease agreement that you used prior, then you're probably in good shape. But sometimes you will buy a property and you will adopt tenants. When I adopt tenants, they are signing my new lease or they're getting a rental increase. That's all it is. If they don't want to sign my new lease, then there will be a month to month premium added when theirs expires because they need to be on my lease. All the tenants need to be on my lease. Okay. I can have a conversation about that if you guys are battling that, right? Incentives. Consider offering incentives to encourage lease renewals. Now, these incentives should not be in the form of discounted rent. Okay. And it's far more important that they're not in the form of discounted rent if you have a multifamily commercial building, because why? It impacts the value of the building. It impacts the value of the building. Okay. So there's things that you can do. We used to have something called a white to wow program, which is basically we had like 4 colors you could choose for an accent wall that we would do at your renewal, or we could do a carpet steam clean if the property still had carpet. None of my properties have carpet in them, but that's something that we would do. So there's incentives that there's incentives that'll work that won't impact the value of the building. If you do want to do a financial incentive, do it in the form of a gift card off the books. Okay. Now your company can expense that gift card, but when they look at the books for the, well, I better not get into that. Just don't do a rental discount. All right. All right. Flexibility. Be open to reasonable requests from tenants, especially if they've been responsible and reliable. Flexibility in addressing their concerns can build goodwill and improve tenant satisfaction. All right. Again, this goes along. Just treat people like a human being. Right. If I have a restriction, right? If I have a restriction, a pet weight restriction, this is a perfect example. And I say no pets over 20 pounds. And somebody comes in and says, hey, I got 2 dogs, but one of them is, he's 25 pounds, probably even 30 pounds. I'm not going to just say no. First of all, I appreciate that they were honest and transparent, but I will have them. This is important. I'll grant it. I'll say, yes, you can do it, but I need you to fill out this form. This form is called a request for reasonable accommodation. Why do I have them fill out that form? Because if I approve it for them and don't approve it for somebody else, it's a fair housing violation. That's expensive. So a request for reasonable accommodation. If it's somebody that needs something different, like a physical alteration to the property because they may have a handicap or disability, I will absolutely grant that. I will take care of it. There's a process for that. That is a request for modification, a request for reasonable modification. Okay. Those are 2 different things. Okay. So keep that in mind. What was that first one? Request for reasonable accommodation and request for reasonable modification. A request for reasonable accommodation will protect you in a fair housing violation suit. And it is a request to deviate from your policy. A request for reasonable modification is a request for a physical modification of the asset to support their disability. Okay. Now there are rules for that. So make sure you understand what the rules are. Now, 9 times out of 10, the tenant is responsible for paying for the modification. All right. If it's something small, I'll just cut it. I'll foot the bill. I'm a lot more lenient in properties that I own where, in small towns, right? People don't really have the capital to do all these things. So I'm a little more lenient. All right. Timely renewal notices. We talked about that already. Get them out 4 months in advance, right? And then open a line of communication 4 months in advance all the way through renewal. Document everything, right? We're talking about managing renewals. Document everything. Follow up. And this is the last one in this category, professionalism. Approach lease renewals professionally and courteously. A respectful and professional attitude can foster positive relationships with tenants, even during negotiations. Folks, if you're doing business, you should be professional. I don't care where you came from, what you've been through. You should always have a level of professionalism. Always, always, always. I won't do business with anybody that doesn't have a level of professionalism. Now, I'm not saying you should, be Barack Obama 24 hours a day, but you got to know when to turn it on when we talk about business. So there's got to be a level of professionalism. All right. Now, what are the key takeaways? Consideration in setting rental prices. When setting rental prices, landlords should consider factors such as location, property type, condition, market analysis, utilities, tenant demand, operating expenses, all the things that we talked about, all the things that we outlined in this guide. We talked about the dangers of setting rents too high. Setting rents too high can lead to increased vacancy rates, extended vacancy, decreased tenant interest, negative reputation, but primarily, and a bunch of other things, but where it really hits you is 5 units or above, it impacts the value of the building. Thank you, Crystal. I love all the information you give and the professionalism you give. I was just raised right. That's all, Crystal. I was just raised right. Shout out to Otis and Rita James from San Jose, California. I was just raised right. I used to get whoopings, right? Kids that used to get whoopings, we typically we know how to act when we get older, but thank you. Effective lease renewal management. Manage lease renewals effectively by initiating communication early. We talked about going out 120 days before the lease expires, evaluating the tenant history, consider rent adjustments based on market rates, outlining renewal terms, and blah, 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 blah. Look, folks, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen when you are talking about the renewal process, and there's a lot of balance that needs to be maintained. How much are we going to increase the rent versus the risk of then moving out? We having to turn the unit. We got to weigh that vacancy loss, the cost to turn the unit, versus what we would have made in addition had they stayed in, right? So there's a lot of things that we have to consider. Stagger your leases, right? That's important. Stagger them. You don't want too many leases expiring when no one's moving, right? Around Christmas. All right. Y'all put a 1 in the chat if you guys have learned anything. Just put a 1 in the chat wherever you are if you guys have learned anything. And if you've learned anything on TikTok, if you guys can share it with a friend or two, that share this room. We're not done. We go on full on mastermind for being a property manager, right? Thank you, Lou, right? Thank you, Elmis. Elmis Burks the third. I'm at the third too. That's what's up. We come from good stock. All right. Everybody else that didn't put a 1 in the chat, see, I'm coming after y'all. Matter of fact, let me do a screenshot because I'm gonna start ordering subscriptions to inappropriate website in y'all's name. Hold on 1 second. Joan, oh no, Joan, you're one of my students. Never mind. All right. Moving forward. Thank you, Trini, Jesse. All right, y'all. All right. Thank you. That's what's up. All right. It's just typing a 1. It's not going to break your fingers. Managing security deposits. Now we're getting in compliance. You can have a lot of trouble if you don't have a security deposit system in place. We call it deposit accounting. Understanding the complexities of managing security deposits is paramount for landlords, ensuring a smooth and equitable rental process. Compliance with local and state laws, transparent communication, and meticulous documentation are key elements in this process. Look, folks, security deposit laws, familiarize yourself with local and state laws regarding security deposits, including specific procedures for collecting, holding, and returning deposits. Here in the Bay Area, we have 21 days to get their deposit back to them. Okay. So I'm gonna go down the list. And again, this is all from the property management guide through the 4 Data Points Academy. My students have access to this. On occasion, people will call me for a consult. They got a property, they want to set it up. They'll pay for a consult. This is part of what I give them outside of what we discuss. All right. Security deposit laws, familiarize yourself with what they are. Number 2, proper documentation. Document the condition of the property thoroughly before the tenant moves in. Use photographs, videos, and written descriptions for comparison during move-out inspections. I do a move-in inspection. The move-in inspection is that Danielle? Danielle, feel free to come up. You can rock out. I'll do a move-in inspection, and this is what I'll do. The day they move in, when they sign their lease, with their lease, they're also going to sign a move-in inspection, noting that everything is perfect. Okay. I give them a copy of that move-in inspection and give them 72 hours to get it back to me. When they get that move-in inspection back to me within the 72 hours, I replace the one that they gave me with the one that they signed originally. And I give them copies of both. I sign both copies. right? Now, what does that do? That means we have some agreement about the condition of the property in the beginning. Now, if somebody puts in their 30-day notice, I'll do what we call a pre-move out inspection, meaning I will have a walkthrough scheduled with the property a couple of weeks before they move out and let them know, hey, just to let you know, this is what I would deduct for, and give them an opportunity to fix it. Give them an opportunity to fix it so that there are no surprises. Okay. There was a, oh no, I'm not going to get into that. There was a lady, well, this lady, I was younger, right? And this lady, I had given these people, I had a deposit accounting process, and this woman wanted to charge, I was managing a property in my 20s for this woman. She wanted to charge them back for everything from their deposit. And I told her, she had hired me to manage the property. I told her, you can't charge for that. You can't charge for that. You can't charge for that. She was like, no, I want to charge her for this, for that. I was like, that's against the law. You can't do that. So I did the deposit accounting according to how the law states it needs to be done. She got so mad. We were at the house, and these people did an excellent job cleaning this property. She got so mad that she wouldn't let me leave the house. And it was her and her daughter. It wouldn't let me leave the house. And, man, it almost got bad. Now, this wasn't even my property. I was a young cat, and I was militant back then at the time. And man, it almost got really, really bad. She had no knowledge of deposit accounting, and that was way back when. That was a whole different Otis back then, man. I almost put them ladies through the sheetrock. All right, I didn't, but I had to juke one to get out the house, though. All right, that's not funny, I know. All right, so proper documentation, that's going to save you, right? Proper documentation is going to save you. So make sure you have the appropriate property management software, because a lot of this stuff is within the software. You can do this stuff. Deposit holding. Oh, security deposit amount. So determine the appropriate deposit amount, usually 1 or 2 months rent, ensuring compliance with legal limits in your area. Make sure you check to see what the maximum security deposit is. Just because there's a maximum doesn't mean you should charge that much. I'll usually do a better, it's going to be 1 month's rent on a single family home. If it is if it's a 20-unit building, maybe I'll do $500 deposit, right? Maybe I'll do a little less than that. But a single family home, for me, it's always 1 month's rent. There's a lot of statute in place with respect to how much deposit you can charge here in California, because in some cases, not just how much deposit you can charge, but the rent amount that you're required to make. I'm sorry, the income you're required to make to qualify. And the reason why there were so many issues about it here was there's some neighborhoods out here where there's apartments with a lot of amenities, and some of these apartments are $8,000 a month. And these aren't, in places like, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, this is Mountain View. This is all the peninsula, folks. And just to give you an idea, the peninsula is the expensive part of the Bay Area. Now, there's some expensive parts sprinkled in other parts of the Bay Area, but if you look at, the highest income per capita for a city in the United States, it's Atherton, I believe, which is on the peninsula. So you have San Mateo, where I live, Atherton, Palo Alto, Mountain View, all the tech companies, Silicon Valley, venture capital, all that stuff is on the peninsula. So what happens is, a 2-bedroom could cost you $8,000 a month, and people were required to make 3 times the rent. So you were required to make $24,000 a month to qualify for an apartment. And that's where it started getting ridiculous to some people. And so there's a lot of statute about your requirements and, deposits also. So that would be a $8,000 deposit, plus you got to make an additional $24,000 a month. Like, it's just ridiculous. So just pay attention to it. Deposit holding, store the security deposit in a separate interest-bearing account and provide the tenant with details of the account as required by law in some places. I just look at what the law says I should do, and I just do it. Okay. I got property all over the country. I've had property in multiple cities in Texas, Missouri, Georgia, South Carolina, Michigan. There's probably 1 or 2 that I'm forgetting somewhere. All right. Itemize the deductions. Now, we're talking about deposit accounting, folks. This is important. They can take you to court for this if you get outside of this process. So itemize deductions. If deductions are necessary, provide the tenant with an itemized list along with the receipts or estimates, ensuring clarity and fairness in the deductions made. Okay, folks, don't try to skimp on that. When you go to court for any of this stuff, they usually err on the side of the tenant if it's if it's even, right? Like in football, right? If both the defensive back and the receiver come down with it, what do they say? Tie goes to the receiver. Tie goes to the tenant on this one. All right. Communication. Maintain open communication with the tenant throughout the process, addressing any concerns or disputes promptly and professionally. Legal compliance. Ensure that your deposit-related practices comply with local, state, and federal laws. Again, folks, I typically help people set this process up for their rental. So for my students, they'll give me a call, say, hey, I just closed on this deal. All right, what is it? Okay, is it 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 units, or 4 units, or is it 5 units and above? Because it's going to be completely different for the asset class, depending on asset class. Tiara says, do you use Yardi for property management software? No, I don't. Yardi is for the larger. It's not cost effective to use Yardi on a small mom and pop. So we use Yardi in the property management industry, and Yardi was kind of the industry standard, right? Yardi is very, very expensive, especially the more units you have. Again, we were using Yardi for one development, and it was, it was just under $80,000 to implement it. So obviously you wouldn't do that on a single family home. You don't want software costing more than the home, right? So yeah. All right. Communication, legal compliance, dispute resolution. Establish a process for resolving disputes regarding the security deposit, whether through mediation or small claims court, and ensure fairness and adherence to legal guidelines. Now, if you do everything right, you're not going to be in court. Okay. You're not going to be in court. If you do go to court, there's one thing that's going to save you. And you heard me mention it before. I've been to court 37 times. I've been to court twice for myself. Right. And basically for one time, tenant didn't pay me rent for 8 months. And I ended up having to evict them, right? So I had to go to court for that. There was no dispute. Tenant wasn't disputing it, right? Thank you, sir. That was my husband's question. Your husband must be in the property management industry. If he is, tell me what company he worked for. Shout out to Tiara and her husband. All right. So just keep your records, folks. 35 times I've been to court. What saved me was the judge, they just look at your records. That's it. If you don't have any records, and you haven't been, making records for all this stuff, keeping records, you'll probably lose. All right. So record keeping is very, very important. Now, there's a term called Comstock. Okay. Comstock. I'm not familiar with that one. I think I've heard of them before, but not familiar with that one. So there's a term called useful life when we talk about deposit accounting. And I went over this before. And you can't charge people back for normal wear and tear, okay? And establishing useful life of items like carpet and paint, it's important when you're dealing with deposit accounting because it helps determine what constitutes normal wear and tear versus tenant-caused damage. So useful life refers to the estimated duration which an item can be expected to remain functional or aesthetically acceptable. Landlords often depreciate the cost of items like carpet, paint, over their useful life for tax purposes, but it also is relevant in the context of security deposits. So normal wear and tear. Normal wear and tear is the natural deterioration of a property that occurs over time with ordinary use without negligence, carelessness, or abuse by the tenant. I'm gonna read that again. Normal wear and tear is the natural deterioration of a property that occurs over time with ordinary use without negligence, carelessness, or abuse by the tenant. For items like carpets and paint, this might include minor scuffs, fading, or wearing out of the material due to regular use. Understanding the useful life of these items helps landlords differentiate between normal wear and tear and damage requiring repairs. Now, for example, I use the example of 5 years for flooring, not just carpet, flooring, right? Now, they're going to walk across the floor, right? That's not something that you can get out of, right? They're not going to hover across the floor. So I mentioned before that my normal wear and tear, my depreciation for the useful life is 20% a year. After 5 years, if I got to replace the entire flooring and they move out, I don't charge them back for that, right? Now, Do I ever deviate from that? Absolutely. I'll deviate from that if the flooring is a higher quality flooring and the manufacturer warranties a useful life that is different from my 5 years. So there may be flooring that has a useful life of 7 years or 10 years. Then I'll go ahead and adopt that. Okay. But I disclose that before they move in. So that's in the lease, right? Now, tenant caused damage. Damage caused by tenants, like stains on the carpet or chip paint due to mishandling, is not considered normal wear and tear. When determining security deposit deductions, landlord needs to assess the damage in relation to the remaining useful life of the item. For instance, if the carpet is relatively new and the tenant has caused significant stains that cannot be cleaned, the cost of replacing or repairing the carpet can be deducted from the security deposit. However, if the carpet is old and nearing the end of its useful life, landlords might only charge a portion of the replacement cost, taking depreciation into account. So if you have, is carpet useful life 5 years industry standard? Well, that's industry standard, but it also depends on what type of carpet that you're using. If you're still using carpet, I'm not using carpet anymore, but if you're still using carpet, you got to take that into consideration. So the thing about carpet, folks, is if it's not maintained, then it's going to be destroyed a lot quicker. So is it reasonable to expect the tenant to steam clean the carpet once a quarter, especially if it's a high traffic area, right? It's you can run into too much. There's too much confusion and too much gray area when dealing with carpet. Also, did you replace the flooring before that tenant? So what if the tenant prior had carpet and they took excellent care of it and the carpet looked brand new when the new tenant comes in? Well, if the tenant messes the carpet up, are you going to depreciate it based on it being a new carpet? No, you can't do that because the useful life started with the initial install and not with the new tenant. So those are all things that have to be taken into consideration. When talking about depreciation and useful life, so landlords can use the concept of depreciation to calculate deductions reasonably. For example, if the useful life of a carpet is 10 years and it's already 7 years old when the tenant moves out, the landlord might charge the tenant only for the remaining 3 years of useful life. If the carpet needs to be replaced, a full replacement due to tenant caused damage. Okay. Again, it depends, folks. It depends on the quality of the flooring. If it's carpet, the quality of the carpet. It depends on a few things, right? Did you buy it brand new, or were you just still able to use it from the previous tenant because it was well taken care of? Right? Documentation and transparency. It's important to document the age and condition of items like carpet and paint, both that move in and move out. Clear photographs, videos, and written descriptions serve as evidence of the item's condition. Landlords should be transparent with tenants about the age of the items in the rental property, especially if they are nearing the end of their useful life. Establishing the useful life for items and applying depreciation principle, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into that whole thing. All right. We just went over it. So just understand what you install has a useful life, and you should understand what that useful life is and disclose it to potential tenants. Okay. Now, see, we still cooking, folks. This is all like, what time is it? I started this at about an hour and a half ago, a little over an hour and a half ago. Now we're going to get into vacancy loss. Vacancy loss hits your pocketbook. All right. Now, industry standard, and we talk about, and Tiara, your husband, I'm sure is familiar with this. Industry standard for the large property management companies in the multifamily commercial industry. We cure vacancy based on a process called the 4 Ps. Person, product, promotion, price. Person, product, promotion, price. Person, product, promotion, price. Promotion, product, person, price. You can put them in any order you want as long as price comes last. Why does price come last? Because if you fix the first 3, 9 times out of 10, you don't have to fix the price. So let's talk about the first P, the person, right? This encompasses not only understanding your target demographic or renter, but also the role of the property manager in the leasing process. The property manager should be well-trained, approachable, knowledgeable about the property and surrounding areas, and their duties include, right? Now, this is something that you would take back to your property management company or have a conversation with them, making sure that they fit this bill. Communication. So they should be effectively communicating with potential tenants about the lease features, benefits, and terms. Responsiveness. They need to address concerns, questions, and feedback promptly and professionally. Tours and showings. Personally showing units to potential renters, highlighting the amenities and unique selling points. Tenant screenings. Ensuring potential tenants meet the criteria for leasing, which might include credit checks, employment verification, or rental history. Documentation. Efficiently handling lease agreements and ensuring tenants understand them and agree to all the terms. And building relationships. This is something that's a little more for the larger industries, right? Build rapport with potential and current tenants. Building that rapport can lead to longer lease terms. Positive word of mouth referrals. This involves regular check-ins, addressing maintenance requests promptly, and understanding individual needs. We had a whole process, for the larger developments. And I've done some lease ups. And a lease up is when we build the development from ground up, right? And if I was managing it, then we would have a whole program, community outreach. We would have events and all types of stuff, right? So again, some of this may be overkill, if you just have a single family home or a few units, but still it's better to have the information and not need it than need it and not have it. These principles still apply. You just scale them down to fit whatever it is your needs are. What's up, Don? Don Pill Method in the building. All right. So remember, we're talking about the 4 Ps, and this is how we cure vacancy. Person, product, promotion, price. We just did person. Now we're going to do the product. Basically, product is your product show ready, or are you doing tours while you're still working on the information? All right. You guys down there with the red ticket, feel free to follow the room up top so you're notified anytime I jump on here and give one of these master classes. All right. Promotion. Let's talk about 4 categories: digital presence, traditional marketing, referral programs, feedback, and reviews. Digital presence. In the age of technology, folks, a robust online presence is vital. Maybe not so much for a single family home, but if you are going to be in the real estate investing business and you have a website that is linked to all your properties so tenants can come in and do service requests and all that other stuff, a digital presence is important. So it includes having a user-friendly website with virtual tours if you're doing that, high resolution photos, and clear descriptions. So when you advertise, make sure that you are putting the product in its best light. That's the product. Just make sure it's show ready. It's in good shape. The 3rd P is promotion. Actually, that was more. That we kind of went over promotion, right? Product is more unit quality, amenities, safety and security, community engagement. That's product, okay? But it's all the same thing. Just make sure the product is show ready and make sure it's being promoted to the right areas. That one I mentioned earlier, I had a property manager out in Michigan that let one of my properties go 8 months without being rented. And not only were they not managing the asking rate for that rent, they were also not promoting it to the right place. They were only promoting it on their website and maybe some other local websites, but they didn't do their due diligence to see what the number 1 lead sources were. On the West Coast, the number 1 lead sources for apartment rentals, the number 1 lead source for apartment rentals is Craigslist. So much so that in the multifamily commercial industry, you are required to post every vacant unit on Craigslist 3 times a day. You're required. If you don't, it's a performance issue. You can get in trouble, right? So there were 2 times as of recent, 3, where properties weren't being leased. Once it was for me, 2 times it was for my students. I stepped in, did a Craigslist posting, property was leased in 2 weeks, all right? So understand where the different places to promote are going to be most impactful. And then the last thing is price. And, you want to do a market analysis. You want to have flexible terms, right? Terms does not mean flexible pricing. It means maybe offering different durations for lease timeframes. Incentives and discounts, those are fine, but make sure they're not tied to the property in the form of reduced rent, especially in the multifamily commercial industry. If you want to give a free month, okay? If you want to give a free month to somebody as an incentive, do a 13-month lease and make the free month at the end of the lease, okay? It's very, very important when you start calculating net operating income and all those other things. Come on up, Karen. So we got Karen, Brave Soul, has a question. All right, Karen, you can come up. I just pulled you up. So whenever you're up, feel free. So, how do you manage vacancy? 4 P's: person, product, promotion, price. Address those 4 things. Do the first 3, do price last. Okay. The first 3 can be in any order. The reason why you do the first 3, you're probably not going to have to adjust the price. Okay. Now, folks, we're on a home stretch. Oh, are we though? Let me see. I may have to do a part 2 tomorrow, but let me see. We have managing service requests, navigating evictions, and then I got some recommendations for how to choose property management software. Okay. Oh, cool. This is nice. I'll tell you what. Let's do this. How many of y'all want this guide? You want me to just send you the guide? How many of y'all want this guide? I'm gonna do something for y'all. I'm gonna give it to some of y'all. Okay. If you go to my website and you tell me how much we charge for mentorship, you tell me how much we charge. I'll get you this guide. That's how I know you went to the website at least to see what it is we do. Is that fair? You don't have to buy nothing. I'm not saying buy nothing or sign up or nothing like that. You just tell me, you go to the website, you tell me how much we charge, and I will get you this guide. And you got to text the number that I put in the chat. You folks on TikTok got to text the number that's above my head. And you folks on, let's see, is there anybody on Instagram? I'll put the number on Instagram just so you guys have it. 702-710-8030. So if you go to my website, you tell us what we charge for mentorship. Oh man, what we charge for mentorship. I'll get you this guide. I'll text you the link to be able to download it. Because it's Saturday and it's 9:42 already. I got to go work out. All right. Now, I know, let me see. I know Karen had a question. Karen, you're one of my students, so you can just reach out to me anytime if you're having trouble coming up. Let me see. I'm trying to invite you up. It's just not doing it for some reason. So feel free, Karen, you know how to get a hold of me. All right. Anybody else got any questions, whether it be TikTok? Amigo, why would you put it right there? How am I going to get you the guide, Amigo? You got to text that number, text the answer to that number above my head. I can't put the link right. I can't get it to you right now. All right. So since Amigo put the number up on TikTok, now you can't use the same number. No one can use the same number. He put, that was our starter one. It's all good, brother. That was our starter one. So 5,999. So just text me, Amigo, and I'm going to make sure you get this guide. Now, none of y'all can use that same number now because Amigo took it. All right. All right, y'all. I'll stay on for about another few minutes or so. Let me start knocking down. Let's start shutting down these other lives. She Mun, what's up, sis? All right, so I'm gonna end the live stream on. For everybody else, I'll do a quick closeout. I'm gonna keep TikTok and Clubhouse open for just a few minutes. For everybody else, my name is Otis James. I am a full-time real estate investor, mentor, all things real estate. I'm the founder of the 4 Data Points Academy. We're the only real estate investing training platforms that has no end date. So we are so confident in our ability to turn people into real estate investors that they stay on with me until they determine they no longer need to be. And even then, they still stay on. We just do different stuff. We go build stuff and invest together and, do some cool stuff. We got a pretty good community and some great people. That being said, I think I'm going to close out Instagram. Thank you, Instagram and Facebook and YouTube.